The first time my wife let another man laugh at me in public, there were 44,000 people in San Francisco for RSAC that week, and not one of them knew I was the man holding the key to a $90 million deal. RSAC has a way of making ordinary men feel smaller than they are. Glass walls, polished floors, neon blue security logos floating over exhibition booths, badges swinging from expensive lanyards, venture capital people smiling like every handshake had a number attached to it. The air smelled like coffee, cologne, new carpet, and ambition. Everywhere I looked, someone was selling protection, risk, trust, the future. I stood near the sponsor lounge with a bottle of water in my hand, wearing a navy suit I had owned for years because it still fit, watching my wife move through that room like she had been born under conference lights. Natalie Turner looked beautiful that night. I wish that made the memory softer. It does not. She wore a white blazer over a black dress, her blonde hair pinned back, her smile bright enough to turn heads from 3 booths away. People knew her name there. Vice President of Brand Partnerships at Aegis Meridian Cybersecurity. The woman who could walk into a private dinner and leave with 2 investors asking for follow-up calls. I used to be proud of that. I used to watch her work a room and think, that is my wife, look how far she has come. But pride changes shape when the person you are proud of starts looking through you instead of at you. Bradley Kane stood beside her with one hand resting too comfortably near the small of her back, laughing with a group of executives from a cloud security firm out of Virginia. He was the kind of man who treated every conversation like a stage. Tall, silver watch, sharp jaw, voice polished enough for panels and private dinners. Chief Revenue Officer. The man who could turn a weak quarter into a victory lap if the lighting was good enough. Natalie laughed at something he said, tilting her head back the way she used to do with me, before she learned that quiet men did not photograph as well as powerful ones. I told myself to breathe, not because I was calm, because breathing was the only thing in that room I still controlled. Then Bradley saw me. His smile widened, not with welcome, but with opportunity. "Michael," he called out, loud enough for the circle to turn. "Come here. We were just talking about how hard it is to get into RSAC these days." Natalie glanced at me, and for 1 second, I waited for warmth. A small smile, a hand reaching for mine. Anything that said, "This is my husband, treat him with respect." Instead, she gave me the kind of look people give luggage left in the wrong hallway. I walked over anyway. Slow, measured. Bottle of water in my left hand, right hand relaxed at my side. Bradley lifted his glass and looked me up and down. "Be honest, Mike," he said. "Do you even know what half these people do? Or did Natalie just bring you here to carry her coat?" The laughter came fast. Not loud enough to stop the room, just loud enough to find every crack inside my ribs. A few executives chuckled into their drinks. One woman looked away, embarrassed, but not brave enough to stop it. Natalie laughed too. That was the part one felt later, long after the words faded. Not Bradley's voice. Not the stranger's. Her laugh. Clear. Easy. Practiced. Like my humiliation was just another networking joke. I looked at my wife, and she did not look ashamed. She looked relieved that the room had chosen a side, and it was not mine. Something cold settled in my chest, but I did not raise my voice. I did not throw the bottle. I did not ask her why she was letting another man turn our marriage into entertainment. Men who explode in rooms like that give people permission to rewrite the whole story. Angry husband. Insecure husband. Bitter husband who could not handle his wife's success. I had seen enough boardrooms to know how quickly truth gets buried under tone. So I stayed still. I let the laughter pass over me like bad weather. Behind Bradley, a screen the size of a garage door flashed the Aegis Meridian logo in electric blue. Under it, in clean white letters, were the words everyone in that sponsor lounge had come to celebrate. Aegis Meridian secures $90 million strategic expansion. Applause rolled from the next room, where another panel had just ended. Cameras clicked. Badge scanners beeped. Natalie leaned closer to Bradley, glowing in the reflected light of the company I helped build before either of them understood what it cost to build anything that lasts. Bradley kept smiling because he thought silence meant weakness. Natalie kept smiling because she thought my best years were behind me. And I stood there with a bottle of water in my hand, feeling my marriage split open in a room full of strangers, while the biggest lie of the night glowed behind them in corporate blue. They thought they were laughing at a husband who had wandered into the wrong world. They did not know they were laughing in front of the man who could stop the deal. I stood there long enough to let them believe they had won. Then I gave Bradley the kind of smile a man gives when he has decided not to correct a child in public. "Good one," I said, quiet enough that only the circle heard it. That made him grin harder, because he thought he had pushed me into the small corner he had built for me. Natalie touched his sleeve like she was rewarding him for cleverness. I saw it. I let myself see it fully. Then I stepped away before my face could betray the part of me that still remembered buying her first business suit on a credit card I could barely pay off. Pain does not always arrive as a scream. Sometimes it walks into your chest wearing polished shoes and sits down like it owns the place. That night, mine sat right behind my ribs while I crossed the sponsor lounge and found a quiet stretch of hallway near the freight elevators. The noise of the conference softened behind me, turning into a low hum, like traffic heard through hotel glass. I leaned one shoulder against the wall and looked down at my badge. Michael Turner. Guest. That word almost made me laugh. Guest. In a company whose first detection engine had been written on my old kitchen table in Austin, while Natalie slept upstairs with law school brochures open beside her. 14 years of marriage can hide inside a single plastic badge if enough people forget who paid for the ink. I met Natalie before the dinners, before the panels, before venture capital men started, asking her opinion as if she had been born holding a microphone. She was 25 then, working entry-level marketing at a regional software firm, driving a used Honda Civic with a cracked windshield and a stubborn little smile that made me think she had more fight in her than the world understood. I was already deep in cybersecurity by then, the kind of engineer who could spend 12 hours chasing a bad signal through a network and forget to eat dinner. I did not have much charm. I had focus. I had a rented duplex, student loans, 2 monitors, and a belief that good work eventually spoke loud enough for good people to hear it. Natalie liked that about me once. She used to sit beside me with takeout containers open on the floor and ask me to explain what I was building. I would tell her about intrusion detection, encrypted traffic, false alarms, the difference between a real threat and background noise. She would listen with her chin in her hand, eyes bright, and say, "You build things that protect people." I carried that sentence for years. Some men carry medals. I carried my wife believing in me. When Aegis Meridian was nothing but a name on a whiteboard and 3 tired engineers sharing office space over a tire shop, Natalie helped where she could. She proofread early pitch decks. She made coffee so strong it could take paint off a mailbox. She told me my sentences were too technical and rewrote them so investors could understand that what we had built mattered. I never forgot that. Even when things changed, I tried to remember the woman who stood beside me before the room had lights. Success did not arrive all at once. It came in pieces. A first client in Dallas. A pilot contract in Denver. A $2 million Series A that felt like a miracle until payroll made it feel small again. I missed dinners. I missed birthdays. I missed weekends where Natalie sat alone at restaurants telling waiters I was stuck at work. I own that. A marriage does not crack from one side only. But I also know what I gave. I gave my 20s, my sleep, my health, and most of my silence to building something stable enough that she could stop worrying about rent and start dreaming. Bigger than survival. I paid for her executive program. I introduced her to the board that later hired her into partnerships. I put her in rooms because I believed she belonged there. At first, I was proud. Then the pride began to sting. She stopped saying we built this and started saying my career. She stopped asking what I was working on and started asking why I still dressed like I had something to prove to a server rack. Quiet became boring. Careful became small. My refusal to brag became, in her words, a lack of presence. I would watch her in mirrors before charity dinners, fastening earrings that cost more than our first car, and she would say, "You have to learn how to enter a room, Michael." I never told her that I had entered plenty of rooms before she knew those rooms existed. I just nodded, because I still loved her, and love can make a man excuse the first 100 cuts as accidents. But standing in that hallway at RSAC, with Bradley's laughter still crawling under my skin, I understood something I had been avoiding for years. Natalie did not want a partner anymore. She wanted a reflection of the life she thought she deserved. Bradley gave her that. He was loud where I was measured, polished where I was practical, hungry for applause in a way that made her feel close to powerful people. And I was the old foundation under the new marble floor, useful until someone noticed it was there. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A calendar alert reminded me of the private investor reception in 40 minutes. The same reception where Bradley would celebrate the $90 million expansion and Natalie would stand beside him smiling for photographs. I locked the screen and slid the phone away. My hands were steady now. That surprised me at first. Then it did not. I had learned a long time ago that panic is expensive. Calm is useful. So I took one breath, straightened my jacket, and walked back toward the noise. Not because it did not hurt, because it did. When I walked back into the sponsor lounge, the room had shifted into that evening rhythm conferences get when business and performance begin wearing the same suit. The daytime crowd had thinned, but the important people stayed. Executives with private meeting schedules, investors with quiet smiles, federal buyers who never raised their voices because everyone else lowered theirs for them. The lighting had changed too. Colder near the product displays, warmer over the bar, turning every glass of sparkling water into something expensive. Natalie stood beneath the blue Aegis Meridian sign with Bradley beside her, and for a moment, they looked like the photograph she had been trying to become for years. He leaned down when she spoke. She touched his arm when she laughed. Not long. Not enough for a stranger to call it anything. Just enough for a husband to feel the room tilt. There are things a man knows before he can prove them. The extra second in a glance. The private joke that stops when you come close. The way your wife's voice changes around another man. Brighter, younger, lifted by attention she no longer asks from you. I had noticed pieces before. Bradley calling after dinner hours. Natalie stepping into the pantry to answer. Her phone face down during breakfast. New dresses arriving before trips, she said were only client meetings. I had collected those details in the back of my mind like receipts I was too tired to total. That night at RSAC, the total finally stared back at me. Bradley saw me returning and smiled like a man who believed the room itself belonged to him. There he is, he said to the group, lifting his glass again. The quiet husband. A few people chuckled, softer this time, testing whether I would give them permission to laugh harder. Natalie looked at me over the rim of her glass. Her expression said, "Please do not make this awkward." That was almost funny. I was not the one standing too close to another woman's husband. I was not the one turning a marriage into a networking prop. But somehow, in that moment, I was the risk to manage. Bradley continued, enjoying the small stage he had built. Michael is very low profile, he said. Natalie keeps telling me he prefers it that way. He gave her a sideways look. Some men are just more comfortable in the background. Natalie smiled, not fully but enough. Enough to show she understood the joke. Enough to let it live. My throat tightened, but my face stayed calm. I looked at each person in the circle and gave them the courtesy of remembering their names from their badges. Paul from a cloud compliance firm. Denise from a venture fund in Menlo Park. Aaron from an insurance carrier out of Chicago. People become more careful when they realize you are actually seeing them. Background work matters, I said. Most systems fail because people only respect what is visible. Bradley blinked once, then laughed as if I had made a harmless technical comment. That is exactly why Natalie is so valuable, he said. She understands visibility. Markets do not reward hiding in a basement with old code. There it was again. The clean little knife. Old code. Basement. Me reduced to a relic in a Navy suit. Natalie did not correct him. She adjusted the thin gold bracelet on her wrist and looked toward the reception doors, where a photographer was setting up near the sponsor wall. She was already thinking about the next room, the next face, the next picture. I remembered when she used to hate cameras. Back when we were young, she would hide behind my shoulder at company cookouts, laughing because she said she never knew what to do with her hands. I taught her how to stand for investor photos. Turn slightly, chin down, smile with your eyes, not just your mouth. Years later, she had mastered it, so, while she could erase me from the frame without moving an inch. Bradley placed his hand lightly behind her back as the photographer waved them over. Natalie went with him. Not dragged. Not surprised. She stepped into that space like it had been saved for her. I watched them pose beneath the company logo, his shoulder angled toward hers, her smile polished and warm, both of them glowing under the kind of light that forgives almost everything except truth. The photographer took 3 shots. Then Bradley said something near her ear, and Natalie laughed again. Softer this time. Private. Familiar. My wedding ring felt heavy on my hand. I did not twist it. I did not look away. A man has to be honest with himself before he can be honest in court, in marriage, or in any room where people are lying with good posture. What I saw was not a misunderstanding. It was a choice repeated so many times it had become comfortable. Natalie had chosen the stage. Bradley had chosen my silence as the safest place to stand. And I had chosen, for too long, to call dignity patience, when sometimes it was only delay. Across the room, Bradley waved me into the edge of the photograph like he was being generous. "Come on, Mike," he said. "Let us get one with Mr. Natalie Turner." The group laughed again. Even the photographer gave an uncertain smile. Natalie's eyes flicked to mine, warning me not to embarrass her. That was the moment something inside me went still. Not numb. Not broken. Still. Like a server room after the power cuts and the backup system comes alive. I stepped beside them, but not too close. The flash went off. In that white burst of light, Bradley looked victorious, Natalie looked radiant, and I looked like exactly what they needed me to be. Quiet. Harmless. Already defeated. That was fine. Evidence rarely announces itself when it is being gathered. Sometimes it smiles for the camera. The photograph was barely 10 seconds old when my phone vibrated in my jacket pocket, and somehow that small buzz felt louder than Bradley's laughter. I stepped away from the sponsor wall, while Natalie leaned toward the photographer to check the shots. Bradley was already shaking another hand, already turning the moment into currency. I moved toward a column near the edge of the lounge, where the carpet swallowed most of the noise and the light from the exhibit floor came through in strips of blue and white. The message was from Evan Brooks. I had not seen his name on my screen in almost 2 years. Evan had been one of our first engineers, a thin, nervous kid from North Carolina who could find a network flaw faster than most people could find their car keys. He hated politics. He hated investor language. He hated any meeting where someone used a simple word when a complicated one could make them sound smarter. That was why I trusted him. Men like Evan did not send dramatic messages. They sent logs. The email subject line was blank. The body had one sentence. "Mike." They buried the breach report. For a moment, the room around me lost shape. Not because of Natalie. Not because of Bradley. That pain was personal, sharp, humiliating, but personal pain has walls around it. This was different. This had no walls. A buried security report in a cybersecurity company is not just office politics. It is a loaded weapon sitting on the table while everyone pretends it is a paperweight. I opened the first attachment. Incident summary. 3 weeks earlier, an enterprise customer had triggered a detection failure during a controlled review. The failure was not catastrophic, but it was real. A rule set had missed lateral movement inside a test environment. The kind of issue that could be fixed if admitted early, or become a serious company risk if hidden behind confidence and expensive slides. I opened the second attachment. Network logs. Timestamps. Internal notes. Evan had highlighted the part that mattered. Initial finding escalated to product security. Follow-up requested. Status changed from critical review to post-event evaluation. Post-event. I knew what that meant. Wait until after RSAC. Wait until after the investors clap. Wait until after the $90 million expansion looks too public to question. My mouth went dry, but my hands stayed steady. Then I opened the third attachment. A message thread. Bradley's name appeared first. We cannot lead with uncertainty this close to announcement. Then Natalie. Can we frame this as a contained customer-side test issue? Then someone from product. That is not accurate. Then Bradley again. Find language that protects the story. The story. Not the customer. Not the product. Not the company. The story. I scrolled lower. There it was, sitting in a draft investor deck. No unresolved high-severity failures. No buried surprises. No reason for any partner to doubt our readiness. An important business claim, simple enough for investors to understand, strong enough to help close $90 million, and dangerous if the people presenting it knew it was not true. My stomach tightened, but not with fear. With recognition. I had spent half my life building systems that caught what people tried to hide. It turns out companies are not that different from networks. A bad signal moves through them quietly at first. Someone ignores an alert. Someone changes a label. Someone says the timing is not right. Then the whole structure starts trusting a false reading. And by the time anyone admits the dashboard is wrong, the damage is already inside the walls. I looked up from the phone. Natalie was standing beside Bradley again, smiling at a man from a New York fund. Her hand rested around a champagne flute she had not taken a sip from. She looked calm, elegant, untouched by consequence. Bradley looked even better, because men like him always look best right before the bill arrives. I wanted, for one human second, to walk over and ask Natalie what she had done. I wanted to hear her say there was an explanation. I wanted the woman from the old Austin duplex to step out from behind that white blazer and tell me she had not helped bury a risk that could hurt customers, employees, and the company we once believed protected people. But wanting a softer truth does not make the hard one disappear. So I did nothing visible. I forwarded Evan's email to a private account I used for legal correspondence. I saved the attachments. I took screenshots of the message headers. Then I texted Evan one sentence. Preserve everything you have. He replied almost immediately. Already did. There are more files. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and let the cold settle into something useful. My wife's betrayal had cracked my home. Bradley's arrogance had turned my marriage into a joke. But now they had made a mistake bigger than both of them. They had confused a quiet husband with a powerless one, and they had confused a conference announcement with a shield. Across the room, the reception doors opened, and a staff member called for VIP guests to begin moving toward the private investor event. Bradley adjusted his cuffs. Natalie checked her reflection in the dark glass. I stood in the blue spill of the sponsor lights and understood exactly what had to happen next. This was no longer about embarrassment. This was serious company risk. I followed the stream of sponsors and investors toward the private reception, but I did not enter with them. At the last second, I turned left into a quieter corridor lined with service doors and gray carpet, the kind of hallway every luxury hotel hides behind its chandeliers. The noise from the conference thinned behind me until it became a muffled pulse through the walls. That was where I stopped pretending I was only a humiliated husband. I stood under a recessed ceiling light, took out my phone, and opened the folder Evan had sent. 3 files. More coming. Enough to change a marriage. Maybe enough to change a company. The old me, the man who still wanted Natalie to choose decency without being forced, would have walked into that reception and asked her to step outside. The old me would have searched her face for the woman who used to sit barefoot on our apartment floor in Austin, circling typos in my first pitch deck with a red pen. But the man standing in that hallway had heard his wife laugh, while another man called him useless. The man standing there had read her name in a message thread about delaying a breach report. Love can survive disappointment. It cannot survive being used as cover. I unlocked my phone and called Elaine Porter first. Elaine had been my corporate attorney since the second financing round, back when our conference room was a borrowed space with a broken thermostat and a whiteboard stained from cheap markers. She was in Boston now, 3 hours ahead, and when she answered, her voice carried the clean alertness of someone who slept lightly, because clients like me rarely called late with good news. Michael, she said, tell me what happened. I did not start with Natalie. I did not start with Bradley. Personal pain belongs in the right room, and this was not that room yet. A buried security incident report, I said. Possible false claim in investor materials. $90 million expansion signing tonight. I have files from Evan Brooks. Bradley Kane and Natalie Turner are in the message chain. There was a pause. Short, but heavy. Do not confront anyone, Elaine said. Do not threaten anyone. Do not forward those files casually. Send them to my secure address. Preserve the original messages. I am starting a formal legal hold. Hearing her say it steadied something in me. Legal hold. Not rage. Not revenge. Procedure. A clean line through a dirty room. I sent the files while she stayed on the phone. She asked for names, times, locations, who was present, what had been announced publicly, what had not been signed yet. I answered like an engineer giving incident details. No adjectives. No theories. Just facts. Then she asked the question that turned the night. Do you still hold founder consent rights through Turner Digital Holdings? I looked toward the reception doors at the end of the hallway, where Natalie and Bradley had just disappeared into warm golden light. Yes, I said. Then nothing gets signed without you, Elaine said. Not tonight. During the second financing round, I had given up the title most people understood, but I had kept one thing the board could not casually erase. Written founder consent over major expansion deals. I did not keep it because I wanted control. I kept it because I had seen good companies destroy themselves when salespeople learned how to outrun the truth. Bradley had probably seen that clause years ago and dismissed it as old paperwork. Natalie had probably believed the same thing. That was their mistake. Old paperwork has a way of becoming very current when lawyers start reading it out loud. After we ended the call, I stood still for 5 seconds and listened to the hotel breathe. Somewhere below me, trucks moved along Howard Street. Somewhere beyond the glass and steel, San Francisco kept glittering like it had no idea lives were falling apart inside its conference rooms. Then I made the second call. Mark Feldman, my divorce counsel, answered on the fourth ring. I had met him 6 months earlier and told myself it was just planning, just caution, just a man protecting assets after too many cold dinners and unanswered questions. Men lie to themselves politely when the truth would require movement. Mark did not waste words. He never did. Is this the night? He asked. I closed my eyes once. Not from weakness. From the weight of finally naming it. Yes, I said. I need separation. Documents prepared. I need the prenuptial agreement reviewed again. And I need all communication routed through counsel after tonight. He exhaled softly. Understood. Do not argue with her. Do not move money. Do not make emotional promises. Document everything. Document everything. 2 words that sound cold until you have lived long enough to understand they are a life raft. All 3 of them were already on retainer. That was not luck. That was preparation. My third call was to Ruth Callahan, a forensic accountant in Dallas who had once found $3 million hidden inside vendor payments, so ordinary they looked boring. Ruth answered with a raspy voice and no patience for drama. I told her about expense accounts, conference travel, sponsor hospitality, and the possibility that company funds had been used for private arrangements. Send me access through Elaine, she said. I want travel records, card statements, hotel invoices, reimbursements, and calendar entries. People think money disappears. It does not. It leaves footprints. I almost smiled at that. Footprints. Logs. Different languages for the same truth. Betrayal leaves records if you stop bleeding long enough to look. When the calls were done, I had 3 people moving before Bradley had finished his first victory speech. Elaine had legal review underway. Mark was preparing the end of my marriage. Ruth was getting ready to follow the money. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and looked down at my hands. Still steady. That mattered. Not because I was untouched. I was not. I could still hear Natalie laughing. I could still see her standing under the blue sign beside him, bright and proud and distant. But pain had become direction now. I walked toward the reception doors, not as the man they had mocked, not as the quiet husband they thought would swallow another insult, but as the one signature they had forgotten to fear. The private reception was held on the 32nd floor, in a glass room that looked out over downtown San Francisco like success had been poured across the city in gold. The Bay Bridge glittered in the distance. Below us, traffic moved along the streets in thin red and white lines, ordinary people going home, while men in tailored jackets lifted glasses over a deal that was not as clean as the room made it look. I stepped inside and felt the temperature change. Not the air conditioning. The room itself. This was not the open conference floor with booths and badge scanners. This was where people lowered their voices and raised the stakes. Board members stood near the windows. Investors gathered around high tables. A few senior clients held sparkling water and wore the careful expressions of people trained never to look impressed too early. At the far end of the room, a small stage had been set up with the Aegis Meridian logo behind it, bright and blue, almost holy if you did not know what was hiding underneath. Bradley was already there, standing beside the podium with Natalie at his side. He looked comfortable, almost relaxed, like a man waiting for applause he had already spent in his head. Natalie saw me come in. For 1 second, her smile faltered. It was small, the kind of crack no one else would notice, but I knew her face better than any room ever could. She had expected me to stay away after the sponsor lounge, to drift somewhere near the bar, quiet and wounded, while she and Bradley stepped into the future without me. When I did not do that, her eyes sharpened, not with concern, with warning. Bradley noticed too. He excused himself from a conversation with 2 investors and crossed toward me with that public smile of his. All teeth and confidence. The same smile salesmen use when they think the contract is already signed. Michael, he said, placing a hand on my shoulder like we were old friends. I looked at the hand, then back at him. He removed it. Smart enough to feel the edge, not smart enough to understand the blade. I was hoping you would stay for the reception, he said. Natalie worried you might feel out of place. Behind him, Natalie held her glass a little tighter. I could see the tension in her fingers. I am fine, I said. My voice came out even. That seemed to disappoint him. Men like Bradley do not just want to insult you. They want your reaction so they can sell your pain as proof. He leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough to pretend this was private while still keeping us visible to the room. Listen, Mike. I know tonight was a little awkward downstairs, but you have to understand something. Rooms like this move fast. They reward people who know how to lead, how to sell, how to be seen. His eyes flicked toward Natalie. Your wife understands that now. I said nothing, not because I had no answer, because every second he talked, he told me more about the story he had written in his own mind. He thought Natalie had outgrown me. He thought Aegis had outgrown me. He thought the quiet man in front of him was an emotional loose end, not a legal one. He gave a small laugh, soft and cruel enough to hide under the music. Men like you do not survive rooms like this, he said. Natalie needed someone with a future. The words landed clean. No shouting, no profanity, no scene. Just a sentence designed to make a husband feel like a chair being removed from a table he helped build. I looked past him at Natalie. She was close enough to hear it. She did hear it. Her face told me that. And still she said nothing. No, Bradley, do not talk to my husband that way. No, Michael helped build this company. No, you are wrong about him. Nothing. She just stood there in her white blazer, polished and silent, protecting the room instead of the man who had protected her for 14 years. That silence did more damage than Bradley ever could. It did not break me. It clarified me. You are right about one thing, I said. Bradley's smile returned. He thought he had won a confession. This room decides futures. He chuckled. Exactly. I nodded once. Then enjoy the next few minutes. His smile thinned. A little confusion passed behind his eyes, but arrogance covered it quickly. What is that supposed to mean? I looked at the podium, the board members, the investors waiting for the announcement, the glass walls reflecting all of us back at ourselves. It means timing matters. Natalie stepped forward then, finally finding her voice, but not for my defense. Michael, she said quietly, the way someone speaks to a man she hopes will not embarrass her. Please do not do this. Here. I almost asked her what this meant. Standing still, breathing, existing in a room where she wanted me invisible. But there are questions a marriage answers without words, and she had already answered too many. Bradley's jaw tightened. This is not the night for some insecure husband routine, he said. That should have made me angry. Instead, it made everything simple. I had Elaine moving, Mark preparing, Ruth waiting for records, Evan preserving files. The founder consent rights still sat where Bradley had never bothered to look, buried in agreements he probably thought were old paperwork. He had mistaken calm for surrender. Natalie had mistaken loyalty for dependence. Both of them had mistaken my silence for permission. A staff member approached the podium and tapped the microphone. The room turned toward the stage. Bradley smoothed his jacket and looked back at me with a final little smirk, the kind a man gives when he believes the spotlight will protect him. Natalie took her place beside the stage, glowing again under the blue light. I moved to the back of the room near the windows, pulled out my phone, and saw Elaine's message waiting on the screen. Legal hold ready. Founder consent confirmed. Standing by. For the first time that night, I let myself breathe all the way in. The city shimmered below us, bright and indifferent. Bradley stepped to the microphone, ready to announce the future he thought he owned. I locked my phone, slid it into my pocket, and watched him begin his speech. Bradley began the way men like him always begin, with gratitude polished so smooth it no longer sounded human. He thanked the board, the investors, the customers, the partners, the product team, and then, with a smile sharp enough to cut glass, he thanked Natalie for shaping the public trust that made the next chapter possible. People applauded. Natalie lowered her eyes with the perfect amount of humility, the kind that still knew where every camera was. I stood near the windows with the city behind me and watched the room accept the performance. That is the dangerous thing about a beautiful lie. If the lighting is right and the speaker is confident, people will lean toward it. Bradley spoke about momentum, market leadership, expansion into critical infrastructure, and the responsibility of protecting American businesses from invisible threats. Every sentence had been built for investors. Clean. Strong. Rehearsed. I knew because I used to write the technical truth beneath sentences like those. He gestured toward the screen, and the first slide appeared, blue and white, expensive and simple. $90 million. Strategic expansion. National enterprise footprint. The room warmed around him. Heads nodded. Phones lifted for quiet photos. Natalie smiled like the future had already signed her name. Then Bradley said the line I had been waiting for. Our record speaks for itself. No unresolved high-severity failures. No buried surprises. No reason for any partner in this room to doubt what we have built. The words hung there. Bright. False. My phone vibrated once in my pocket. Elaine. The legal hold had been sent to the board chair, the general counsel, and the audit committee. I let Bradley speak for another 15 seconds. Long enough for the claim to exist in the room. Long enough for witnesses to hear it. Long enough for everyone to understand that this was no longer private drama. Then I walked forward. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just one step, then another, across carpet thick enough to swallow anger. A few heads turned. Natalie saw me first. Her smile stiffened. Bradley kept talking until he noticed the room shifting around me. The board chair, Harold Whitman, looked up from his phone. Harold was 70, careful, and too experienced to ignore a man walking toward a podium without wanting attention. Michael, he said. Bradley's microphone caught the name. The room quieted. I stopped 20 feet from the stage. Far enough not to look like a threat. Close enough not to be ignored. Harold, I said. Before this announcement continues, the board needs to pause the signing. A ripple moved through the room. Bradley laughed once, too quickly. Mike, this is not the time. I did not look at him. I kept my eyes on the people with actual authority. The company bylaws and the Turner Digital Holdings protective provisions require my written consent for this expansion, I said. That consent is withdrawn pending corporate review of a buried security incident report, investor materials, and related internal communications. There it was. Not an accusation shouted across a ballroom. A process opened in front of witnesses. The general counsel moved toward Harold, speaking low and fast. One investor lowered his glass without taking a sip. Natalie's face had gone pale under the warm lights. Bradley stepped down from the stage, his smile gone now, replaced by something harder and much less charming. You do not know what you are talking about, he said. This is way above your level. I finally looked at him. That assumption seems to be the center of your problem. Someone near the back whispered. A phone stopped recording. The room felt smaller, tighter, every expensive suit suddenly aware of the exits, but too careful to move toward them. Harold cleared his throat. Michael, are you alleging a failure to disclose company risk? I am stating that documents have been preserved and counsel has been notified, I said. I am also requesting an immediate hold on all signing activity, all external statements about the expansion, all travel records, all expense reports tied to this event, and all communications connected to the incident report. Natalie stepped forward, her voice soft but strained. Michael, please. This is not the place. I looked at her then. Really looked at her. The woman I married was still in there somewhere, buried under ambition, fear, and the glow of a room she had chosen over truth. It became the place, I said, when you put a false claim on a screen in front of investors. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. Bradley turned on her with a quick, ugly glance. Not concern, not loyalty, only calculation. He had just realized she was in the same message chain. She saw it too. That small betrayal between them happened in a blink, and it told me everything their relationship was built on. Harold raised one hand. All company-issued devices and relevant communications are preserved for legal review. No one deletes, forwards, or alters anything. The general counsel nodded. Immediately, Bradley's jaw tightened. Natalie looked at the floor. The $90 million slides still glowed behind them. Bright. Useless. I did not feel victory. Victory would have been walking into that room with a wife who respected me and a company telling the truth. This was not victory. This was cleanup. I adjusted my jacket, turned toward Harold, and said, "Protect the company first. My lawyer will handle the rest." Then I walked away from the stage, through a room that no longer laughed, while Bradley stood under his own slide and finally understood that the quiet husband had not come to make a scene. He had come to end one. By the time I reached the hallway outside the reception, the music behind me had stopped pretending everything was normal. Doors opened and closed in short, nervous bursts. Low voices moved through the glass walls like weather. A few minutes earlier, that room had been full of champagne confidence and polished predictions. Now it sounded like a company learning the difference between a celebration and a legal hold. I stood near the elevator bank and watched the general counsel walk back in with 2 security staff members to secure company-issued laptops, access badges, and key records. They were not loud. They were not dramatic. That is the thing people misunderstand about real consequences in American business. They do not usually arrive with shouting. They arrive with badges, laptops collected in padded bags, calendar invites canceled without explanation, and lawyers using calm voices that make everyone else stop talking. Bradley came out first, his face red under the hotel lights, his phone pressed to his ear. He was speaking fast, trying to outrun the facts. "No, this is a misunderstanding," he said. "The founder provision is old language. It will not hold." He saw me and stopped walking. For a second, all the charm drained out of him and left only panic wearing an expensive suit. "You have no idea what you just did," he said. I looked at him and felt nothing close to fear. "I protected the company." "You embarrassed yourself," he snapped, but his voice lacked the old music. Men like Bradley sound different when the room stops agreeing with them. The board is not going to let some jealous husband freeze a $90 million transaction. Then you should have no problem with the review. That landed harder than an argument would have. His mouth tightened. He looked past me, toward the reception doors, as if someone more powerful might appear and return the room to him. No one did. Then Natalie came out. She walked quickly at first, then slowed when she saw us standing there. The white blazer that had looked so bright under the stage lights now looked too sharp, too thin, like armor made for photographs instead of storms. Her eyes moved from Bradley to me, then back to Bradley. She understood the shape of the disaster before either of them said it out loud. "Bradley," she said, keeping her voice low. "What did you tell them?" He turned on her so fast that the last little fantasy she had built around him broke right there in the hallway. "What did I tell them?" he said. "You said Michael was done. You said he had no operating authority. You said he was just attached to old paperwork." Her face changed. "Not guilt yet. Fear first." "I never said that. You implied it every time you rolled your eyes when his name came up. That is not the same thing. It is exactly the same thing when I relied on it. There it was. Not love. Not loyalty. Not protection. Reliance. A business word wearing an affairs cologne." Natalie looked at him like she had finally seen the man behind the expensive dinners. Bradley looked at her like she had become a liability. I had spent years wondering what existed between them. Whatever it was, it did not survive its first legal problem. Natalie turned to me. "Michael," she said. My name sounded different now. Not like an inconvenience. Like a locked door she wanted opened. I did not know it would go this far. I looked at her carefully, not cruelly. "That is not a defense," I said. "That is a confession that you stopped caring where it went." Her eyes filled, but I did not move closer. Comfort would have been dishonest. "Can we talk somewhere private?" she asked. "No," I said. "From now on, you can talk to my lawyer." The elevator opened behind me with a soft chime. Bradley stared at the floor. Natalie stared at me, and I stepped inside before either of them could turn panic into negotiation. As the doors closed, I saw her standing alone under the hotel lights. No Bradley beside her. No stage behind her. No room applauding. Just a woman who had traded a husband for access and discovered access disappears the moment power changes hands. 3 weeks later, the city looked different through the window of Elaine Porter's office. San Francisco still had the same steel towers, the same hard blue sky, the same traffic crawling below like nothing important had ever happened above it. But I had changed, and when a man changes, even familiar streets seem to belong to someone else. The conference banners were gone by then. The sponsor booths had been packed into trucks. The photographs from that night had disappeared from company channels so quietly that most people probably never noticed they had been posted at all. That is how corporate cleanup works. First, the celebration vanishes. Then the calendar invites. Then the biographies. Bradley Kane's name came down from the leadership page on a Tuesday morning, just before lunch. Suspended turned into separated from the company by mutual agreement, which is the kind of sentence lawyers build when nobody wants the sentence to bleed in public. But the review found enough to end his career at Aegis Meridian. Travel charges. Private dinners coded as partner development. Messages about delaying the incident report until after the expansion announcement. A draft investor deck with safer language rejected because, as Bradley wrote, confidence sells better than caution. Confidence. That word looked different when printed in a legal binder. And because one of the enterprise customers tied to the expansion held federal contracts, the questions did not stop at the boardroom door. Bradley had spent years selling certainty. Now he had to answer people trained to distrust polished answers. Natalie lost her role even faster than I expected. The board removed her from external communications, then from partnership strategy, then from the company entirely after Ruth followed the expense trail. Through hotel invoices, calendar gaps, and reimbursement notes written with too much care. She had not signed the technical report. She had not built the product. But she had helped polish the story while knowing the truth underneath was not clean. In American business, that matters. In marriage, it matters more. Mark Feldman placed the divorce papers in front of me in a conference room that smelled faintly of coffee and toner. No dramatic music. No storm outside. Just glass walls, a legal pad, and a pen that felt heavier than it looked. The prenuptial agreement held. Turner Digital Holdings stayed protected. Natalie would receive what the agreement allowed, not what her new life had taught her to expect. The house in Austin would be sold. Her access to the trust ended. Communication would remain through counsel. Clean. Firm. Final. I signed my name without shaking. That surprised me, but only for a second. I had already grieved the marriage in smaller ways for years. Across silent dinners. In hotel lobbies where she walked ahead of me. In rooms where she introduced me last. At RSAC, I did not lose my wife all at once. I recognized she had been leaving for a long time. The next day, she came to Elaine's building anyway. Mark called me from the lobby. She is here, he said. She says she only needs 5 minutes. I looked out at the street below. A cable car bell rang somewhere in the distance, bright and ordinary. No, I said. Please tell her all communication goes through counsel. There was a pause. Understood. 10 minutes later, my phone lit with a message from an unknown number. It was Natalie. I only read the preview. Michael, Bradley used me. I lost everything. Please, can we just talk once? I did not answer. Not because I hated her. Hate would have kept us connected. Silence was cleaner. I forwarded the message to Mark and set the phone face down. That afternoon, I went back to Aegis Meridian's temporary war room, where Evan and a dozen engineers were rebuilding the detection process that never should have failed. There were no champagne glasses there. No stage lights. No one asking for photographs. Just laptops, pizza boxes, whiteboards, and tired people telling the truth in plain English. We contacted the affected customer. We corrected the investor materials. We paused the expansion until every claim could survive daylight. It cost money. It cost pride. It saved the company. Near midnight, I stood alone in the old server lab and looked at the blue glow from the racks. Years earlier, Natalie had told me I built things that protected people. For a long time, I thought she had been talking about software. Now I understood protection sometimes means pulling your name from a lie, pulling your signature from a deal, pulling your heart away from someone who only loved the doors you could open. Karma comes around, and when it does, it brings receipts, lawyers, and every document people thought you were too calm to use.